There was a woman in her late 50s who kept asking herself the same question. Why am I always tired, even when I sleep enough? She wasn't staying up late. She wasn't overworking. On paper, everything looked fine. And yet, every afternoon, around the same time, it would happen. Her energy would drop, her focus would fade, and her body would feel heavy. At first, she blamed sleep, then age, then stress. But none of those were the real reason. Because what she didn't realize was this. Her energy wasn't being lost at night. It was being slowly drained by something she repeated every single day. Over the years, one of the most common complaints I've heard from people in their 50s and 60s is surprisingly simple. I feel tired, even when I sleep enough. As a physician, I learned early on that energy is often misunderstood. Most people believe it comes only from sleep, that if you rest well at night, you should feel strong during the day. But energy is not just something you restore at night. It is something you manage throughout the day. The body operates in natural rhythms, cycles of alertness and fatigue. One of the most noticeable patterns happens in the afternoon. A natural dip in energy is expected. It is part of how the body works, but in many cases, that dip becomes much stronger than it should be. Instead of feeling mildly tired, people feel drained, heavy, sluggish. Even simple tasks begin to feel harder than usual. And when this happens repeatedly, day after day, it begins to affect quality of life. I remember one woman in her late 50s who described her afternoons the same way every day. Around 2 or 3 o'clock, her shoulders felt heavy. Her focus faded. She often sat quietly in her chair, sometimes scrolling through her phone or watching television. Scenes very similar to what many of us experience during slow afternoon hours. At first, she blamed sleep, then age, then stress. But none of those explanations fully matched her situation. Because what many people don't realize is this. Energy is not lost only at night. It is shaped by what happens in the hours after you wake up, how you move, how much light you receive, and how actively your body begins the day. When those early signals are weak, the afternoon dip becomes deeper than necessary. And over time, that repeated pattern slowly drains daily vitality. The woman who felt drained every afternoon eventually decided to observe her daily routine more closely. Not just how she slept, but how she lived her mornings. What she noticed surprised her. Her mornings were calm, almost too calm. She woke slowly, sat for long periods, and eased into the day without much movement. Sometimes she remained seated near the window with a cup of coffee, enjoying the quiet, a peaceful habit many people enjoy. But her body never fully activated. There was very little walking, very little stretching, very little physical engagement. And as the hours passed, her energy didn't build. It remained low. So when the natural afternoon dip arrived, the one that happens to everyone, her body had no reserve energy to maintain stability. The drop felt deeper, heavier, and harder to recover from. That realization changed everything. Her problem wasn't the afternoon. It was the beginning of her day. So she introduced a simple change. Nothing extreme, nothing demanding. Each morning, she stepped outside for a short walk. Just a few minutes at first. Feeling the sunlight on her face, breathing fresh air, letting her body wake naturally. Much like the gentle walking scenes we often associate with peaceful morning routines. She also added light stretching after waking. Simple movements of the arms and shoulders, slow breathing, gentle motion, similar to basic yoga or morning mobility exercises. At first, it felt unnecessary, but she stayed consistent and slowly. Her mornings felt different, more alert, more alive, and when the afternoon arrived, the drop was still there, but it was lighter, easier to manage. Her energy didn't crash the way it once had. What she discovered was simple, but powerful. Energy is not just restored. It is built from the very start of the day. One of the biggest mistakes I see people make when dealing with fatigue is trying to fix the problem at the moment it appears. They reach for coffee. They sit down to rest. They try to push through the heaviness. And while those actions may help temporarily, they rarely solve the real cause, because by the time the afternoon fatigue arrives, the pattern has already been set hours earlier. Energy is cumulative. It builds or drains based on earlier actions. When the body remains inactive for long periods in the morning, it never fully shifts into an alert state. The muscles stay relaxed. Circulation remains slow. The brain receives fewer signals to stay engaged, and that low energy state carries forward. I've seen this happen in many individuals who spend long stretches sitting, perhaps scrolling through their phone, watching television, or remaining on the couch for extended periods. These are familiar scenes in daily life, especially during quiet mornings at home. There is nothing wrong with rest. But when inactivity dominates the early hours of the day, the body adjusts to that lower demand. Over time, this creates a predictable pattern. Late morning feels slow, early afternoon feels heavy, and by mid-afternoon, fatigue becomes unavoidable. Another factor that contributes to this cycle is constant mental input without breaks. Watching television for long periods, scrolling endlessly through news or social media, or staying mentally engaged without pauses can overwhelm the brain without providing true restoration. The result is not just tiredness, it is depletion. And when this pattern repeats daily, afternoon fatigue begins to feel normal, expected, even inevitable. But it is not inevitable. It is influenced by habits, small ones, repeated consistently. And once those patterns are recognized, they can be adjusted because the body responds to how it is used, not just how it is rested. Improving daily energy does not require dramatic lifestyle changes. In most cases, it begins with one simple principle: activation, especially in the morning. The body needs signals that the day has begun. Light, movement, and gentle engagement act as powerful triggers that shift the body into a more alert state. One of the most effective signals is exposure to morning light. Even standing near a window or stepping outside for a few minutes allows natural sunlight to reach the eyes and skin, helping regulate internal rhythms that control energy levels. This is why many people feel more awake after spending a few minutes outdoors at sunrise or during early morning hours. Movement is equally important. Not intense movement, just consistent movement. A short walk, gentle stretching, slow arm movements while breathing deeply. These actions increase circulation and wake up the nervous system. They tell the body that activity is expected, and the body responds accordingly. Breaking long periods of sitting is another powerful strategy. Standing up every hour, walking across the room, stretching the shoulders or back, These small interruptions prevent circulation from slowing and help maintain steady energy throughout the day. Mental breaks also play a role. Moments of quiet reflection, sitting peacefully, looking out a window, or simply breathing slowly allow the brain to reset. Without these pauses, mental fatigue builds quietly in the background. The goal is not intensity, it is consistency. Small signals, repeated regularly, teach the body to maintain stable energy instead of dramatic highs and lows. And over time, these small changes create noticeable improvements in how the day feels. Feeling tired is not always a sign that something is wrong with your sleep. Sometimes, it is a reflection of how energy is managed during the day. This is something many people misunderstand, especially after the age of 50. They assume fatigue is simply part of aging, something unavoidable and permanent. But in many cases, fatigue is patterned, built slowly through daily habits, the way mornings begin, the amount of movement during the day, the balance between activity and rest. All of these shape how energy feels in the afternoon. I often remind people that the body is incredibly responsive. Even later in life, it adapts to what it experiences regularly. If movement becomes routine, energy improves. If inactivity dominates, fatigue becomes more likely. Think of the simple image of a morning routine. A person opens the curtains. Sunlight fills the room. A few gentle stretches begin the day. A short walk follows. Nothing intense, just steady movement and fresh air. These moments may seem small, but they send powerful signals to the body. Signals that support alertness, circulation, stability, and over weeks and months, these signals accumulate into lasting change. Because energy is not fixed, it is dynamic, responsive, and influenced by daily behavior. Sometimes, the reason a person feels drained in the afternoon didn't begin at noon or even mid-morning. It began quietly, in the first hour after waking. And when that first hour changes, even slightly, the entire day often changes with it.